Hi everyone, it's Soviet Bear. Today I have Joaquin with me here. Hi Joaquin. So I want to ask you a question. Putin's recent statement when he met a Swiss president, he said that May 11th referendum, the referendum of independence of Donetsk Republic, it should be postponed. So, my belief and my thought is Putin said this because he needs some time. He needs to win some time before the polite people, before letting the polite people in, and to keep the referendum without provocations and without spilling more blood.
Yeah, that's when I look at these kind of situations, Yuri, I look at like what are the different angles. I try to look at all the different reasons, and then I apply whatever background information I have. For one thing, we know that Putin is a highly skilled chess player, and in his educational background, they had them playing, speed chess underwater, upside down, and shit like that, right? So I mean, the thing is that when you look at these types of maneuvers, they're always calculated. I think people who are out of the loop, or people who are sympathetic to Russia, but they don't understand how strategic planning works, they think that just because they, the viewer, they, the audience, are reacting like surprise, they think that the people operating at the high level are operating like just reactively, and that things are surprises to them, you see. But what they actually have a number of different contingency plans, right? And I think that this follows a very rational model of a given path along one or two contingency plans. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, what can you say? I heard that there are a lot of mercenaries right now on the ground in southeast Ukraine. No, American, Finnish, German, but also there have been reports of mercenaries from Poland, from Baltic states.
Yeah, look, this is how you get regular army from NATO countries and Finland involved in this kind of fight. You put them in irregular uniforms. You basically have them, they've just quit the army or they've just retired a year ago, and then you have them sign up for a private mercenary firm, and we're supposed to believe that that international law no longer applies to them. It's like we're supposed to believe that if McDonald's changed its name, that it's no longer McDonald's, even though people are still buying Big Macs and shit like that, right?
Yeah.
So, but I have worked out several possibilities of what's going on. I think that's what you want to hear. So I'm gonna try to get into it a little bit, if that's all right.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, there are mercenaries from the countries you mentioned, and also including Poland, now involved. And what they have done is they have formed them into a unit called Kiev 1. And Kiev 1 is supposed to be, you're supposed to think that it's just Pravi sector and other radical nationalists. It's supposed to be a citizens' militia. Reason they needed this is because regular generals, regular commanders of regular Ukrainian army, it's already been publicly announced, will not follow orders to attack other Ukrainian citizens anywhere in Ukraine, including the east, right? So the new captains and the new commanders are, except for some of the Pravi sector people and some of the inner circle of the junta government, rest of them don't even speak Ukrainian because they're not Ukrainian. They may have taken a crash course in a language school to be able to communicate basic orders like jump, go, run, hide, cover, throw, But other than that, they're not speaking the language. So there will be some difficulties with that. but yeah, so why? So when Putin has been communicating to foreign leaders in Europe that he is going to urge the people who are in the East who are supposed to have their referendums on May 11th to postpone those referendums, right?
Right.
Okay, so so first of all, back up and say what is the framework? In other words, when Putin says, I'm going to urge them that I think it's not a good idea, what is he actually saying? Behind that, right, is that he's saying that I don't tell them what to do. You see, he's saying that when I tell them things that they don't work for me. You see, because this is a people's uprising. This is how this whole thing has to be framed. So when Putin says, I will recommend something, and then we've heard that, people in the areas that are going to have the referendum have said, well, we will take this proposal. We respect Putin. We're going to put this recommendation to the People's Council. So they're demonstrating that they have, their own process, that this is a grassroots movement, that it's not just Putin telling them what to do.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Now, in one scenario, they may go ahead and have the May 11th referendum, and then Putin can say, well, everyone knows that I urged them not to, but they did anyway, so now we must act to defend them. I didn't want this. I told them not to do it, but now they are, and now they've voted to join Russia, and this puts into motion a constitutional provision. I am not a dictator. I am just the legitimate head of state. But we have a Duma, and the Duma has the responsibility to put this into effect. And my role as commander-in-chief, once that this is put into effect, is to do whatever the Constitution and the law say I'm supposed to do. So he's trying to. So in one possible scenario, we're talking about one possible scenario, Yuri. May 11th referendum may still go forward, but Putin can say, "Look, this was something that happened without. I'm not pulling the strings here. I'm not the one. This is not like some KGB conspiracy from the Kremlin. This is a legitimate uprising, and the people just did their own thing." You see?
Yeah.
I have other scenarios, but I don't want to talk over you. Sorry.
Okay. As you already know, NATO has declared Russia an adversary number one.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they have made it official. At last they have made it official. They remember because why NATO was created in the first place. It was created to counter threats from the East, right?
From
So
the Soviet Union, right?
yeah, yes. So actually, there is absolutely no surprise for me that I think I always thought sooner or later it will happen.
Right. The mask will come off. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
the
mean,
mask.
there's no basis for NATO to exist except to fulfill the geostrategic imperatives of the Kissinger-Brzezinski theory of the primacy of the center piece on the grand chessboard, which was the goal of the Great Game in the 19th century too, the Russian sphere. Of course, they'd like to turn that into 12 or 15 different countries that are little miniature states that can be pitted against each other in a never-ending divide and conquer scheme by NATO in the West. But something, Yuri, to also remember is that actively in the NATO-influenced countries, Azerbaijan, Georgia, somewhat Turkey, and this whole part of the world, and also in Central Europe, in the universities, they have right now ongoing a contest for university students to get a big grant if they can write a 20 or 30 page paper, not a big paper, about what a post-Russian Eurasia would look like, and what these different countries' borders would be. So they're trying to actively get the next generation of the intelligentsia involved on this project to destroy the Eurasian sphere and turn it into a lot of mutually hostile microstates. But I want to get back a little bit to the Putin declaration of the telling that he's going to urge to delay the May 11th referendum.
Yes, yes, okay.
Okay, so one of the things is to make it seem like, well, that the mercenaries from the Kiev junta kidnapped and were holding hostage the people's governor of Donetsk Oblast.
Yes, Pavel Gubarev.
Yes, and on the same time, in the same news cycle, you see he was released ostensibly in exchange for 3 or 4 special forces from the Kiev side that had been captured in another city. So now, in bargaining, because these people are in the bargaining table, right? In bargaining, you have a move where you can plant an idea in the other party's mind for them to make a proposal, make it seem like it's their proposal, even though you wanted them to make that proposal, and then make it seem like that's like, I don't know if you know about Brer Rabbit and the Briar Patch, but it's an old American. Basically, this rabbit lives in a thorny bush, so he tricks his captor into saying, whatever you do, don't throw me into that thorny bush, So then they throw him in the thorny bush, but that's his home, and he gets away anyway. You see that the idea being there, right? Obviously, is that it's a Briar Patch, that the deal for swapping the Donetsk people's governor and perhaps part of that getting NATO to propose, why don't you put on hold the May 11th referendum or we're going to kill this guy. You see, I don't think Putin would have proposed that, but it would have been smart for Lavrov to use his Dr. X telekinetic powers and shit to put that in the other people's minds for them to propose it. Of course, I'm kidding, but there's a lot of rational ways and strategic bargaining that you put, you basically prompt the other side to make the proposal that you wanted them to make, and then you can respond in a way that feigns surprise or that you act like it's a serious compromise, even though it's exactly what you want. That's also in chess. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that, I hope people I'm friends with don't watch this, right? But the Dugin's friends who work for RT, Eurasianist, English-speaking Eurasianists who work for RT, are all over like the Twitter sphere and Facebook right now saying, damn it, Putin, what is he doing? Is he going to betray the people? We're so mad at Putin right now, blah, 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 blah. Well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I saw. That's
a script, dude, of course, because this is connected to the same idea that Putin doesn't control RT. This is the info war. As I've said before on Morris's show, and also I've said on the Plain report with Paul Plain, the Plain Truth, that in fact a most important thing right now is to get the German and European elites who are sympathetic to Russia for economic reasons, and then to also get the anti-war movement activated in Europe, which is mostly from the left. And to get them activated, it's going to require that they have the ammo, and talking about European elites and European leftists, elites who support Russia and leftists who are anti-imperialists, that they have the ammo to show that Putin is being the one who's reasonable. Angela Merkel is the one who's proposed a new round of talks, and also saying that, and Putin is saying, and there's a provision here to put the May 11th election off, to postpone it, but that that the violence in the East must stop. So there's an if there. There's an if there. Also, these statements are often just test balloons to see how people will react. And again, that's a scenario in which the May 11th referendum will go forward. I suspect that it may not. Okay, and I'll explain why. But so you got that point, that the people who we know worked for RT, who are friends of Dugin, are
Yes.
are playing the radical opposition role that Dugin plays in this script, where he always criticizes Putin for not going far enough.
Yes, yes. Dugin always said that Putin is not enough. Putin is not radical. Putin should be more radical and blah 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 blah.
Right. I try to look at things objectively and strategically, and this is an important script for them to play because it changes the parameters of what's considered radical. If you didn't have people saying that Putin was not radical enough, then that leaves the space for people to say that things that Putin is doing is too radical. You need people over here to say that he's not radical enough. You need that. That's how politics works. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That puts him in the moderate center. You see?
Yeah, because in Russia, Putin is criticized by all the radicals. Radical pro-Western liberals criticize Putin for being tyrannical and homophobic, and on the other hand, Russian nationalists, they criticize Putin for being too liberal,
Right.
for not stopping migration, and
Right. So where does that put Putin? It puts him in the moderate center. Okay.
yes.
I agree with you about more time, buying more time also. In this scenario, more time equals more atrocities. Perhaps in one scenario, like if Kiev 1 goes around, starts doing some death squad stuff like I predicted in a piece I published yesterday or the day before, I said Kiev 1 would be doing, you know what a death squad is, like in Latin America? Going in, killing priests, killing people, members of civil society, activists, journalists, not military people, but that militarized hit squads going in and killing unarmed activists. Okay, those are called death squads in English. Okay, so yeah, more time, more atrocities. That means more support from Europe, more of an outcry from Europe. When the European grassroots left, and when the European elite pro-Eurasian conservative realm, who have like the gas deals and the industrialists and not the financiers who are dealing in dollars with the Atlanticists, when those people can create the discourse and they can like find that right point, then when you see all these human rights atrocities happening from the U.S.-backed forces in Kiev, then you need to see more public protest, more editorials in the newspapers, and we've seen some signs of this already. But there hasn't, and there was an anti-NATO or anti-war march in I believe Germany a few days ago already. We need to see more of these. Maybe the 11th was too soon, and maybe there's been some difficulty getting these going. Here's scenario number 4. Of course, there must be time, like you said, to get some polite people involved, or at least to get some professional organization. Of course, there is already, but I already received information from my people that Eurasian organizers were briefing Cossack fighters and giving them like a political briefing, and we're getting ready to send Cossacks into the east of Ukraine. Yeah. That was only like a few days ago, and the opening at the border was only made 3 days ago, and I have good intel right now if that border opening with Russia is still open. An alternative would be to just, because it's so close, would be to parachute them in or helicopter, but that would be so much more obvious, and you'd have like, CNN people filming that and shit like that, so that might get a little bit, might break the script that it's a completely internal thing happening. So definitely though, whether it's from outside help or happening completely from within say, Donbass or within Kharkov or within Lugansk, they need to break the siege around Slavyansk. The siege in Slavyansk is still in place. So you can't have like an election or a referendum if the people can't come into the town to vote, or if there's a siege around the city. They need to first provoke a humanitarian crisis where they say that now that the Kiev junta has created a humanitarian crisis and that there need to open up a humanitarian corridor, that Russian soldiers need to come in, not soldiers, excuse me, Red Cross need to come in and you know, send in supplies because of the humanitarian crisis that the siege around Slavyansk is creating. This is going to push back the May 11th referendum, or if these atrocities happen before the referendum, then it might be enough to create the momentum needed for the referendum to happen in time. Number 5, Kiev won, Pravi sector plus international mercenaries. They've been late in deploying to the east. If the 11th goes down and let's say the referendum occurs and the vote goes to join with Russia, this puts into play a very fast series of events which can make these people Russian citizens very quickly, even before a vote in the Dumas to accrete. You see what I'm saying? That the Duma must have a vote, but last month, Russia changed its law about expedience and conditions of becoming Russian citizen. They said that if you can trace like a grandparent to Russia, you can almost get this overnight. So, well, I'm sure all these people in the east of Ukraine can show they have one grandparent, you know, who was born in what is still Russia. So there you go. We need, so the Kiev 1 and Pravi sector plus mercenaries need to be pulled into the region, and there needs to be a series of more high-intensity military. There hasn't been enough violence is what I'm saying, and I know that's fucked up to say because we're talking about human beings, but I'm trying to be objective and strategic here. There simply hasn't been enough violence. Kremlin needs NATO to walk into bigger traps. There needs to be the main issue is that the NATO is working with really limited numbers of fighters. This is not like Syria or Libya where you can, you know, import fuckers from all over the Middle East, North Africa, who all speak literary Arabic and can kind of get along. Ukraine is a kind of specific language. There's low degree of interintelligibility with Polish and Ukrainian, except maybe among Galicians who speak like a pidgin. Other than that, if you're a Russian, you can probably understand some Ukrainian. You would know that better. But we know that Germans don't speak Ukrainian, and we know that these Finnish and American guys don't speak Ukrainian, and you can't integrate into what are called effective fighting units people who speak different languages. This is why, for example, in the Spanish Civil War, all of the international brigades were by language.
Yeah.
And then number 6, finally, Putin is looking very optimistically at what Angela Merkel has said, which is that Germany will now be hosting like another meeting about resolving, that Germany is behind a peaceful resolution. And Putin has supported this because Merkel has not given any pre-qualifying statements about what Russia must do or not do in order for Germany to get behind a peaceful resolution to the crisis. This takes the onus away from Russia because Russia's going to do its responsible thing, and it's going to put the onus on Germany. This is putting the German elites who are invested in Russia, which is something like 10,000 different enterprises that are all multi-million euro enterprises. Those are small and medium level enterprises. Then, of course, we're talking about a total of import and export of trade combined is 400 or 500 billion euros a year between the EU and Russia. There's like a lot of billionaires in the EU who need to not have like the Russian stock market take any tumbles, or need to not have, you know, further disruptions in the normal flow of the business cycle, you see. Then you have the anti-imperialist left. We need to see some big street demonstrations in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, and in France saying, you know, no NATO, you know, our countries aren't going to be part of any coalition. We need to see the kind of situation that happened in Syria when the House of Commons voted against siding with the US to escalate over the chemical weapons fiasco in Syria. We need to see a parallel type of, or something akin to that, you see, where European governments are pushed by a popular uprising, not uprising, but, you know, marches and pressure politics to take a firm stance against that they will not be part of a larger war in Ukraine as a NATO alliance. So you see, I think I've covered most of the scenarios and the factors that I have worked out about this surprise announcement that Putin has made. And of course, we were expecting a surprise because you know, you're not playing checkers, you're playing chess. So if there's not some surprise move here, then the stupidest people will win.
Yeah, right. Putin is indeed a great chess player. He's he's a grandmaster.
Yes, he is a grandmaster. Yes.
He outsmarted all of NATO and all of US strategists. And in fact, on the US side, I see a lack of strategy.
Yes.
Can you agree with me?
Oh.
The US side, US players, they are lacking
we
strategy.
can agree with each other, but the most important thing is that high-ranking U.S. strategists like Edward Luttwak have said that the U.S. is lacking strategy. It's the problem, and Kerry also, as I've said recently, and we saw in the news, Kerry said basically that U.S. is failing in strategic thinking and it makes a lot of errors strategically, but that because it was the sole superpower, it could afford to do that. But as soon as he said that, same day or following day, he said, I hope Israel does not become an apartheid state. And then like the media totally focused on this like Israel apartheid thing. I mean, Jimmy Carter's already declared it an apartheid state. The West is no longer ambiguous about that point. Only the Zionist-controlled media tries to pretend otherwise, but mainstream West already understands apartheid is the norm in Israel. But so this thing that Kerry said that kind of made no sense because there's really nothing going on except, you know, the fact I'm saying Israel-Palestine, there's nothing really going on there except that Netanyahu is saying, oh, look at, you know, the PL has basically said that they're going to make a deal with Hamas and now they're not legitimate partners in peace. I mean, come on, that's the same old news. It made no sense for Kerry to say that, except that the same day or the day before, he had said, like, oh, the U.S. doesn't have strategic thinking. So then you've got to say something about Israel that's going to really capture the news cycle. This is how the information war works. So strategic thinking is lacking. You know that, I know that, but, you know, we're just, you know, rank-and-file proletarians, right? The point is that these guys know that. Now, there's another dimension to this, however. You see, once you understand that the guy you're against is smarter than you, you're going to keep fucking up because then you keep second-guessing yourself. Everything they do, you don't know if it's like a diversion or if you're falling into their trap. You keep thinking that anything you do, they've already gamed out, and that anything you do, you're going to fall into their trap. As Edward Luttwak explains in his masterpiece, The Grand Strategy of the Byzantine Empire, that in his introduction, he explains that people primarily, the laymen, I'm saying, and, you know, my audience, your audience, you know, are excluded from this in general because they tend to read on a higher level. But your rank-and-file followers of the BBC or the Guardian or the New York Times, CNN, the regular news cycle, what they don't understand is that in strategic thinking, you don't go the shortest distance from A to B, because your enemy is expecting on level 1 that you're going to take the shortest distance from A to B. So you don't take the shortest distance from A to B. You take all these different, distracted routes, and you're always trying to outsmart your opponent. And so every move that you make is not like the most economical move. You might take the longest route just to get there safely. You might take a route that it's like double and triple, outsmarting people. It's like you might do the thing that they're expecting you to do, that they would expect you to do if you weren't expecting them not to do it, except that they're going to think that you think that I think that you think that I think type of shit, right? So the problem is that at the highest levels, the United States has pushed out the smartest people, and those people haven't been promoted or they've been marginalized.
So what do you think about, will there be more atrocities in Ukraine? And I think if there will be more and more atrocities, and if junta attempts something like shelling Slavyansk with grads and with heavy artillery, I think Putin will retaliate.
Yes,
with
you're
troops.
right, I agree, but you're forgetting, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I mean, you're just summarizing. Don't forget to tell people that that after the shelling and before Putin acts, there's going to be condemnation from major figures in the European Union. Trade union leaders, leftist activists, anti-imperialists, center-right and right-wing elites who are heavily invested in Russia. They have to first, you got to see a change, a continual amplification of the anti-war message that is happening in the European Union. Then Putin can act, you see.
Yet RT and probably some not paid internet activists like we are perhaps the only ones who stand up to this Western propaganda machine.
Right.
And I wonder if people in the West, do they still believe what their media tells them?
No. It's to understand how media operates on the Western mind, people by and large do not believe what the media tells them, but in Anglo culture, in which class was that class is important more than culture, and that one of the indicators of class is your ability to regurgitate the official talking points. And so in the individual hearts and minds of average American, they don't believe the news, but the United States is a police state, and people work without labor contracts, and they can be typically fired for no cause at all. You see, so when Americans because unemployment is somewhere around 50%, their friends are like the people that they work with, because they need to constantly be networking to keep their jobs, right? You following what I'm saying so far? So even though like if you are able to like pull an American aside, maybe have a few beers, have a heart-to-heart, and you know they start really talking about how they feel much like you feel and how I feel. But because all their time that they spend is around a family and friends from work or at work, you will always hear out of their mouth like, oh, fuck, the Ruski's always up to some shit again. Well, I know we got problems, but we got to defend the country. You know, they say whatever you're supposed to say, and that's a hallmark of Anglo culture is people always say what they're supposed to say in what is called polite company.
Okay. Thank you, Joaquin.
All right.
Thank you for this interview. I think we should stop
All right,
right
got
now.
it.
Thank you very much again.
Bye.
Bye.